At last, the meeting of the Common Council for Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 will come to order. The roll call shows all council people are present. And the first order.
We don't have roll call, so we're going to roll call tonight.
You took attendance, didn't you?
Fire, Werman, Tompkins, Varsho.
Here.
Wagner.
Yes.
Stauber.
Here.
Giles.
Here.
Veros. O'Reilly. Rigel.
All present? Okay. With first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next order of business on the agenda is to identify possible conflicts of interest. The packet is before you. Does anybody see anything there that they will need to be excused on or have a conflict of interest? I'm seeing none, so we'll move on. The next up is a public comment period or correspondence. At this time, the council president will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the council president, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any people who wish to speak at public comments tonight? The first hand up was over here. So you come up to the podium, please, and you'll be the next, sir. There's a red button on there you got to push. All this high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
Buttons.
Talking about
Go ahead.
Could I possibly talk to you about this offline? I mean, I think that you and I could have a good conversation about what's all involved in the streetlight. No, but it's not an agenda item.
No, the problem is that generally speaking, when the citizens come up and say something, we're not allowed to question them under the citizens' comments. It's different under a public hearing of some sorts, but we don't have one of those on the agenda tonight. I think, and again, I think Steve would be the best person to answer that question basically if you would leave your phone number or your address with the clerk, I think that would work out well.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not trying to drive you away, and you may end up back before this body at another time as well, but I want to have a conversation with you to explain some of these things, which I can't do tonight under the agenda the way it's worded. And then if you still have concerns, so be it.
Believe it or not, that's the open meeting law. Thank you.
I'll be in contact with you.
All right, sir, with a hat.
Those two numbers in mine are don't know how revenues that land is not Those numbers in March of 2019. Which one we need more help? In your 4.5 years. Marshfield on failure. Also, according to that report, initially from the that's projected over 5, but summarizing that report, 2021. Also, in that way, the city will grow like 12,000. Once that I do need more help. I would need we've already seen. The other main point, we have the MS space. The Lincoln, I would just. Those are rural conversations. Hold on. Budgets. Progress mentioned earlier in creating the new line. Plan. Stuff. Line or the crossing. Calls from our neighbors over there. Noisy. Well, new neighbors. Another intent 13 is a great going. Healthily, the plant first. Is trying to recognize. Second, this was classic. Zoning ordinance. The owner of the quarter. Regardless of legality, summary of frustrating concern. The part of numerous other projects. Big on movement. Proposal. After the fact, money on numerous. All you want
So, yeah, your 5 minutes are expired. Can you wrap it up, please? Thank you.
All these reasons
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be recognized for public comments? If not, we move on to item E, approval of the minutes. That's the October 24th, 2023 budget meeting and the October 24th, 2023 regular meeting. What's your wish?
Move to approve.
Okay, motion by Spiro, second by Varsho. Discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Okay, staff updates. Any staff updates here tonight?
I'm not aware of any this evening.
Okay, council president's comments, I will forego those tonight. City administrator's update. Steve, what you got? Oh, excuse me, first council comments, I apologize. Who's up on council comments? Nobody, okay. City administrator's update, as you wish.
Thank you. 3 items. First of all, just a reminder that the special meeting that we're going to have on the budget and tax levy will be a public hearing. That'll be a week from tonight, Tuesday, November 21st here at 6 p.m. So make sure that that's on your calendars. A week from tonight at 6 p.m., the special council meeting on the budget and tax levy. And then next we have a certificate of appreciation. This is kind of an interesting thing, and a flag came with it, which I'm going to hold up. And this really came to us from the military. Some of you who work here know this, but Sean Schroeder, one of our employees who works in the IT department, has been able to go to military leave a number of times. Every year almost, he seems to have at least some period of time away from military leave. So we got this flag and we got the certificate of appreciation from the military thanking the city of Marshfield for its support of Sean. And I'll just read it to you really quickly. This is to the city for outstanding support of Sean, and it says, "Your patriotism and support are duly recognized and appreciated as part of our total force team. Without your help, we could not have been as successful during operations Enduring Sentinel, Inherent Resolve, and Spartan Shield. Please accept this certificate on behalf of a grateful nation and your United States Air Force." And it's signed by a colonel from the United States Air Force. So we're thankful. Obviously, we're not doing anything out of the ordinary, but we're grateful that Sean was able to serve and that we're recognized for supporting that. And then finally, we have another special recognition that I'm going to ask Mark Kivala, our wastewater superintendent, to make that note.
Assistant wastewater. Waste. Is very intuitive, motivated. Congratulate. I just want to say thank you. This wouldn't have been possible without all of our great staff with water. And thank you for kind words, Marcus. Very appreciated. And I'd like to thank my family for allowing me these opportunities to really zero in on my work. And like I said, without the staff at Wastewater, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So thank you.
You got anything else? That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Next up is reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Do we have any of those tonight? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. What's your wish? Natasha?
Is this where we pull things from the consent agenda?
Yes.
All right, I would like to pull the Plan Commission minutes. That's under J. I think based on public comment, I'm not quite sure which address that is. Is that the 10,000 Corporate Drive?
1,000 Corporate Drive will be in the industrial park.
Oh, is it, which one is the,
I think you're looking for number 3.
The item in public comment is actually the first reading of the ordinance
that was
later
for-
on.
oh,
Right.
okay. So we don't need to pull that, but then I will pull number 3. So, so we're not approving that zoning until later on in the agenda.
Even then, it's only a first reading, I believe.
Right. Do you still want to pull that?
So I will pull item J, which is, and number 3. J is Plan Commission meeting, number 3.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve them now without.
We don't have a
we still
motion in
need
a
one,
second.
Do we still need to?
Still need a motion and a second to approve the rest.
Right, okay.
So moved.
Go ahead. Moved by Warner, second by Spiros. Discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. And then we'll go to item L, which will be considering item, was it J3 that was pulled by Ms. Tompkins?
Okay. So this came up in the planning committee because it's in my district, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. And when it caused quite a flurry as the alderperson of that district, it has taught me lessons about how we need to notice our alder people, tell them about public hearings that are in their district. And I am going to talk about that in items for future agenda, how we can better put out in the public hearings so that we don't get phone calls on a Friday night and then we can't talk to the city until Monday morning. So this is a conditional use permit. It was Mr. Sampson originally requested to do a small business in his home, a gunsmithing business, and he was told that he could do this. He didn't know that he needed a conditional use permit. Later on, our city consultant informed him, actually, we need to give you the special permit. And so that's when it came to public hearing, and that's when the notice was noticed in the newspaper. When this did come to public hearing, there were quite a few concerns. There was some inconsistency with what was being advertised on social media as opposed to what had been applied for, a few things like that. But to his credit, he listened to his neighbors. He changed things. He changed things that night. I heard back from neighbors who said that they really felt like he listened to them. And I think he built an element of trust. And, you know, it could so easily, people could just take issues like this and just say, I don't need to listen to you, you know, but he didn't. He built bridges, and I really appreciated that. And he and I had a long conversation, and I will say that if anyone would take gun safety as seriously as Mr. Sampson does, we would have far less gun-related injuries and suicides in our house. He is definitely a leader in this field, and I think people could learn from him. So the biggest concerns that come up with this is that it's a residential zone, and people want to enjoy the homes that they invest in. And that's why we have city ordinances for these sort of things. So when I think of what could be 3 nuisances that a business, because there's a whole list of the different types of businesses that would need this type of conditional use. It's for manufacturing, gunsmithing, processing, repair or dismantling of appliances, repair or dismantling of vehicles, motors, equipment, or machinery. And I think of 3 goals, of nuisance goals, that no one wants to have next to them. They don't want to have something that, causes a problem with their safety. They don't want to have something that's a problem with their comfort or a problem with the aesthetics of the home that they have. And so we could easily take a mechanic who potentially starts to put cars out on the yard, and that would be encroaching on the beauty or the aesthetics of their property. We could have a mechanic who could start parking cars that he hasn't or she hasn't worked on the streets. so that people are having to go in the middle of the street. And in my neighborhood, there's no sidewalks, so kids and everyone's going around these cars. That would be a safety issue. You could have a mechanic who leaves the garage door open, has lots of noise, the lights are on in the middle of the night. That would be a comfort issue. And so those issues are really important that we make sure that that is put into a conditional use. And that's not in this one. All that was given was that you cannot have a sign, which I agree, because that deals with the aesthetics. And keep your license and don't shoot firearms, which agrees with our city code. So I would just propose that because this is a residential area and because we are going to have more of these requests, that this use and all our future uses, if it's going to be in the residential area, we should say as part of our conditions that there should be no violation of the city codes that are related to nuisance. And if that violation happens, that permit would be lost. And so that would be my proposal, is that we add that condition to this, to the conditions that have already been done.
Would it be appropriate then, let's see, this came from the Plan Commission. Would it be appropriate to re-refer this to Plan Commission with a suggestion of hearing that clause that you wanted in?
I might defer to the city attorney if you have any comments first before we go down that road about what's being asserted. Is it purely a political issue that should go back to the Plan Commission, or is there some other way of addressing the concerns that were raised, broadly speaking?
We'll let Ms. Tompkins address that after Hap's response.
Well, I mean, you have essentially a hearing that was held with a recommendation that went to this body. It's up to the body to decide what it wants to do. One of the options it does have is to send this back for further consideration or evidence taking. That directive is appropriate. I'm going to leave my comments to that in terms of the question of the issues that
this body could, if they wanted to adopt
to refer it back.
Excuse me?
To refer it back to Plan Commission.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, that is something. If you wanted to refer it back to the Plan Commission, you can do that too.
But we don't have a motion on the floor. We have a suggestion, I think.
I mean, I would say on Mr. Sampson's part that he has been very patient as he has had to temporarily close his business. If it was referred back to the Plan Commission, he would have to wait for that as well as coming back here. And I realize that if this had been done well the first time, people do wait months for permits, and I understand that, but this wasn't done well. And so it does seem a little bit of an undue burden for that time. I don't know. I mean, other people can speak, but I feel like we could adopt it with the addition.
Is that correct?
If the question is, could you add some additional condition, you can. I'm going to say that you need to keep in mind that you had a hearing. And so if you're putting conditions on, the body that had that hearing had the benefit of that recommendation through the consultant, I'll say Bryce's report. And those conditions you're placing, though, have to be consistent with the evidence that you received, and it has to be consistent with the purposes of the zoning code. So those are concerns that you need to be aware of if you're going to try to put a condition on. This body can do it, but you need to be careful that you're doing that consistent with that record.
So, Ms. Tompkins, excuse me, who was it over here?
I have a question.
Ms. Spiros?
I'm just a little bit confused here exactly what's happening. So he's a gunsmith and he's operating out of his own home. And he was apparently told by a staff member to go ahead and operate. And then they decided, no, he needed a special permit. So he applied for that permit, and that permit was granted by the Plan Commission. Am I up to date so far?
Yeah, this
And
is the
so
second
now,
reading of it.
okay, and so what are we asking for exactly now to make a special make special rules he needs to follow? Or is this different than any other permit we've ever granted? Have we ever sat here and debated on special rules? I mean, I just don't remember ever doing this. This seems very strange to me.
I can't speak to Ms. Tompkins' intent. I would let her do that herself. Perhaps she can answer your question.
Well, if we've never done it in the past, we should start doing it. And it basically is saying that if a business decides to become a nuisance, a business that's working out of a home in a residential zone, if it decides to become a nuisance and is fined by an ordinance officer, but puts that into the cost of doing business and continues to get fined, that's not very helpful to neighbors. But if they lose their permit for the business because they're a nuisance, then that would be a deterrent.
We don't have a motion on the floor right now. There's just discussion. Okay, I saw 2 hands go up down here. Yes, I know, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I don't know how far we push this. I did hear at the Plan Commission that there is legislation that does not allow us to treat this case any differently than any others. And I guess I would have to ask at this point from our attorney, moving forward like this, is there potential for any legal issues changing it because of this single case? And I would also stress that I think the ordinances already have provisions in place to punish. I don't know how far that goes with being able to take away livelihood. I guess I'm just curious on the legal aspects of what we're talking about here.
Was there somebody else down here that had a question? Natasha, would you care to answer that, or you want to make a motion, or do you want to leave it as it is?
I can make a motion. I would say that we approve the conditional use permit with the addition of addition would be a number 7. And the addition would say violations of city ordinances pertaining to residential properties under section 10, public peace and order will cause the conditional use permit to be null and void.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Is there a second?
No, you need a second for discussion.
We need a second.
I'll second for discussion purposes only.
Who did that?
Russ.
Russ. Okay, I can't even see him. Oh, there he is. Okay, Russ, we've got a second. So, Mr. Warner?
So I just wanted to go back to Mike's question. I think it was to kind of comment on, are there any ramifications of making this adjustment?
So the first question, the way that Mike put that was that, can you do this at this stage? I don't think there's a problem legally doing that. The process would at least contemplate that this body look at the conditional use permit that was authorized, and what that really came out of the Plan Commission was a recommendation. So you're basically now, approving that or not approving it. By pulling it off, you could put an additional condition there, but it has to be consistent with the evidence. So in that sense, I don't think you're at a problem there. And specific, you were asking with respect to this specific type of business or something. No, I don't see that really being an issue, though I do have some pause with the wording that was proposed for various reasons. But when you talk about it's null and void, something being void implies it was never issued. There are some issues there. There could be potentially due process issues if you say a violation of this general idea that there would be a violation of the code related to residential. I'm not sure the wording of that. So the one thing I would say is that we and Councilman Tompkins did indicate that we have a code in place for violations of the code, okay? Things like too much noise, disturbances of the peace, that sort of thing. you framed them under nuisance, which is kind of difficult because when you say that, we have a specific code section that talks about nuisances and they're defined within the code. So if you say that if it's a violation that constitutes a nuisance under the code, there would be a way to cross-reference it. Then when you went and made your motion, it was a little bit more broad than that. And so now I'm not sure where that fits. So it's just, that's one of the risks in doing this sort of on the cuff, that you are maybe not taking into account the ramifications of that. That said, one of the conditions that was put on this was that the individual has to have a license. So that is the type of thing that you're talking about. It's not like you can't issue a condition that something happens in the future and then this goes away. In other words, his conditional use permit is conditioned on him having a license to do this business. So you could put something along the lines of what you're talking about as a condition on this in terms of a future violation. It just has to fit with the purpose of the code. So,
excuse me, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the first reading of this?
This is, as a conditional use permit, it's not a first and second reading. It's just one time coming through Plan Commission through the consent agenda. Either we approve it or we don't. Okay. If I can just add real briefly to what the city attorney was saying, I think in general, I agree with you what you're saying about the license issue. If the person doesn't get the license they're required to as a condition. But other than that, what she's suggesting is more in line with seeking revocation of a permit, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's the problem. And normally there would be a process for that to happen. Right. So, and that's one of the reasons why using the term that is null and void doesn't give somebody a due process if there was some type of violation. So that's the only thing.
If I may, just null and void was
without objection, go ahead.
Sorry, null and void was a wording that's already in the conditional use permit that was put in by Bryce.
Okay. There was another hand down here.
On the license.
I think it was Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna make the same exact point, is that I'm reading here, number 5 says null and void. So I was about to say that if we were concerned about that language, we should address that point number 5.
I don't remember that, and I don't have that in front of me. What was the condition that
I'll read it. Failure by the applicant to meet the requirements of the federal firearms license or any other required local, state, or federal licenses or permits will cause the conditional use permit to be null and void.
Okay, so I'm going to draw the distinction between those two. The problem is he can't get this license to do this, meaning that nothing happens without having that first. Do you understand? So in other words, what they're saying is, in order for you to have that business that you'd be handling firearms and transferring firearms, you have to have the federal license first. So that language null and void there makes sense because you couldn't even get your permit unless you had it in place first.
Right, but if the permit lapses.
That's not actually in there. So,
right, okay.
So that's not actually part of it. What the idea behind that was to say that we could issue a conditional use permit with the anticipation that you're going to get a license from the federal government to do that. If you don't get it, this whole entire process is null and void, which is a little different than something lapsing and then it's gone. It is a condition that they be able to meet that. In fact, he can't carry on the business if his license would lapse.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Giles?
I am.
So I thought you wanted to be recognized. Okay, Rebecca?
I'm just trying to clarify this in my head. So I'm struggling with changing this for one permit. I mean, we certainly have given permits for other home businesses. I mean, we give, permits to have CBRFs. These all occur within residential neighborhoods. And if you live near a CBRF, and I do, there's a lot of traffic. There's employees, there's families, there's, events that they hold outside that are loud. And I don't really worry about that because it's a business and they're doing it. So what are the particular concerns? Does he have a lot of foot traffic? I mean, what I don't understand what the concerns are. Is he firing weapons in the neighborhood? Is it the concern over foot traffic? I don't understand, I guess, what I'm missing here.
Okay, now does he want to be recognized?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, now I do have a comment. I believe what Councilmember Tompkins is saying is that she's not looking for this specific, it's for all future as well.
Starting with this.
Starting with this one.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on, Mr. Stauber.
So, what are the concerns concisely? Are they 2, 3? What, just rattle them off for us?
I think any resident doesn't want to have a business that would affect those three factors, which would be comfort, beauty, or safety. And all of those things will not only change your enjoyment of your property, which is the biggest investment most people have. And I feel like that's part of my job, is to protect the neighbors, but also it affects their property value. So that's why I feel like any future things going forward, we should say, and just have a little bit of teeth to this, to say, we're putting in a condition that you need to follow these city ordinances. And if you don't, you lose your permit. You can live there, but you can't have your business there anymore.
Okay.
I have his scoring. Yeah. I think you just touched another nerve. Well, go ahead, please.
So I'm going to caution you about doing that in the sense that we addressed this at the time of the Plan Commission meeting. The conditions that you're trying to put on for this are conditions that would apply to the considerations that are for zoning purposes, okay? So that we're talking about things like, do we allow this type of business to go into, and again, this applies to the adult family home is what you were referring to, those that we've made exceptions for. So you look at things like traffic, you look at things like the number of customers that may be coming in there, and the purpose of that is to decide whether or not you're disrupting the residential nature of the neighborhood by allowing this to happen, okay? What I really give pause to on this, and I'm struggling in my own head right now how this plays out, that if you put a condition on that, if somebody does something that violates at this residence that you're running a business out of, if somebody does something that violates what amounts to one of the nuisance provisions in our code, that then they lose that conditional use permit. I'm not sure you can justify that specifically has to do with the zoning question that you have in front of you, which is what that memorandum that Bryce was talking about, that you have to be able to support that there is a rational relationship between the condition that you're putting on the permit, any of the conditions you put on there have to associate or relate to the zoning and the zoning considerations for allowing that type of business to go in. And so if you can make that finding, and I think you guys can discuss that and try to make that determination, but just simply saying that we're going to put this condition on because this is in a residential neighborhood and our neighbors want to feel comfortable, they want to be safe, they don't want something that would be a nuisance in their area. The very laws that we're talking about, you're concerned about a violation, apply to all of us. All of our neighbors feel that same way for everything that we would do on our property that might create a nuisance. And that particular law, what you're talking about, is one that if you violate it, you could violate it. So as an example, unless you figure out a way to tie this specifically to the business, you're talking about an individual who owns a house but also owns a business, and you're placing a condition on his permit under the conditional use permit for something that might happen in his residence. In other words, he leaves laundry outside drying over the course of the year, or doesn't mow his lawn for a couple of months. It has nothing to do with the business, but then he loses his conditional use permit for a reason that doesn't have to do with zoning. It has to do with our nuisance code. That's the reason why I'm giving pause on that. I'm not sure how that would play out. Not just because it's on this particular one, but now we're talking about, do we start doing this in all of our conditional use permits? You're putting yourself in a position where you may not be able to defend taking that position in regard to a conditional use permit for zoning purposes. So I think you could do it if you can truly sit here and think up of a reason why that specifically applies to the business that's asking for this. And I'm saying business, but it's conditional use permits. So it's not just for businesses. That's one reason we get them, but we get conditional use permits for other reasons under our code. If you're going to put that requirement on each one of these, we need to be able to say that it rationally relates to the purpose that you're supposed to be considering giving a conditional use permit. So that's a concern.
Mr. Stauber.
Just a few thoughts. One, I applaud Alderman Tompkins for the communications, and really good. I applaud the applicant, Mr. Sampson. He's taken corrective action when he was, faced with some objections. I do think we need to respect the process, meaning we can't change it now if it doesn't go back to a public hearing. And I think members of the council will take that position on when we have an opportunity for first or second reading. When you for example, choose to not have Andrew's good at this. We won't short circuit the process. We need to give it, proper airing for public comment. The concern about blight and nuisance, from my understanding, those are covered in other laws or the ordinances that we have in the city. I'd love people to come into my district and apply some of those same rules, and we see a lot of properties get cleaned up. So for all those reasons, I think we move ahead with the Plan Commission recommendation, offer the conditional use permit. In good faith, the applicant seems like it's going to be a solid business, no problems. But the 6 points mentioned in the recommendation, as well as our normal city ordinances, should keep things under control.
Ms. Farrows, did you still wish to be recognized?
No, I mean, I think I agree with what Russ is saying. Again, I don't know this business. I don't know anything about it. So I'm trying to figure out what the concerns are. Like, is it traffic? Is he firing weapons in a residential neighborhood? I don't understand what the concerns are. So did your neighbors specify, or was he able to specify? I guess I'm trying to figure out why this is being brought up in this particular case. Like, what's he doing that we're concerned about, or that the neighbors are concerned about? Because I think that's important to making this decision.
Andrew is next.
Just for my edification, these CUPs, are these indefinite grants, or is there a period of time where they have to renew it?
Typically, yeah, and you see these every month. You probably don't think much about them because they usually pass through the consent agenda pretty easily. Typically, they're in effect for the particular purpose of the particular individual who's granted the permit. It doesn't just run with the property, but until such time as there become concerns that aren't being addressed properly, and then you pursue revocation, perhaps have a revocation hearing to say this permit ought to be revoked because of the, and again, it goes back to things like parking, traffic, noise, and things like that, where you're having a negative effect on the neighborhood. Having said that, I have seen conditional use permits. I'm not sure if I've seen them here, but in my past jobs as well, where they've said, look, we've got some concerns about this piece of what they're going to do. We want to revisit it in 1 year. We want to be able to review it in 1 year and make sure that they are operating within the framework that we want and that things are going well. That does raise some questions. I'm sure that the city attorney would agree. But I've seen it happen to make sure that the neighborhood gets a chance to weigh in and the people at the staff level get to review how things are going. Having said that, if I could just add to what I think the city attorney was saying, you could pull off any of these any time we go through a meeting. I want to pull off C3 or whatever on a plan commission conditional use permit. The kind of things that, again, I've seen historically is, I saw the plan commission meeting on TV and I heard the neighbors concerned about noise going too far into the evening, and I agree with them. I would like to add a condition that says, condition number 4 to the permit, that would say the business can only operate until 8:00 p.m. But again, that goes back to the evidence you're talking about, what was talked about at the hearing and what was raised that would suggest perhaps an additional condition might be appropriate. Am I along the same lines that you're thinking?
Well, yes, and this is broader than that. There wouldn't be anything wrong with this as a condition if you can say that ties to a particular reason in this particular permit for a zoning reason. That's Correct. What I was struggling with. But right. Yes, you could put a condition on there. And I think also to add, I think Andrew's question was, how long do these last? They technically last for as long as that business is in place and there isn't a violation that violates one of the conditions, okay? And I think one of those conditions would be, this is very specific to his permit for the ATF, through the ATF, to be able to do firearms transfers and work on guns as a gunsmith. So if those went, then the question of this permit would be, essentially, it doesn't function anymore.
I wasn't trying to suggest that Councilmember Tompkins' request was out of order. I just was trying to give an example that you can pull one of these off, and you can suggest that from what you've seen, heard, and read, that you think something else additional could be tacked on as a condition. That's realistic.
Okay, I'm going to ask the council members, I'm going to recognize Mr. O'Reilly and then Andy again, and I'm going to ask, ladies and gentlemen, can we please bring this to some conclusion? So first, Mr. O'Reilly, and then Andy.
Thank you. I think first off, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and I do not like the optics of how this looks and how this is being tried to be implemented at this point. It's, in my opinion, ridiculous. This can be dealt with after the fact if we want to change this going forward, but the way that I see this unfolding is absolutely ridiculous. Secondly, I will say that I will not support anything other than approving this as coming forward from the Plan Commission.
Mr. Rigel.
So I guess my concern here is, by all accounts, Mr. Sampson's done anything that's been asked for him, and I don't want to drag this out and inconvenience him, and I'm putting that mildly, anymore, just because of the failure of either this body or the Plan Commission body didn't do its due diligence on that. The reason I brought up the length of it was, on one hand, I don't want to have him walk out of here if he's in the audience. I don't know if he is or not, but I don't want him this meeting to adjourn and then not have a resolution. He's done everything that's been asked for him at this point. At the same point, if we're going to take what essentially amounts to a policy change from the Plan Commission going forward, as we're going to add, I'm going to paraphrase here, add more teeth to conditions. I think Mr. Wolfgren brought up very good points as far as things we need to consider and things we need to get evidence for and having the evidentiary record prior to adding these conditions on. So with that said, I mean, I don't know if and I don't have an answer here, unfortunately, where I don't know, is this an issue where 2 years, I don't know, a time limit on here, revisit it, and then at that point see, do we add that policy back into this one? Do we start doing it going forward? Not this one, because the Plan Commission approved it in that fashion. I'm not sure, but I don't want to have this be dragged out for a failure of foresight on our end here.
Thank you. You want to wrap it up?
Well, sure. Would there be a way for this body to look at our conditional use policies? I feel like it was done so poorly. I feel like people on both the council and the Plan Commission don't even understand this new statute that's 5 years old that says you have to have evidence. It's really vague. Can we look at this, and can we, because I'm looking at this from like the 30,000 foot thing of how can we do things well? And so is there a method that we can look at this and say, are there better ways to put on conditions?
I can tell you from my years of experience, yes, there is a way to handle it. And you might recall that I've questioned the planning department and now the planning consultants on several occasions of what happens when somebody puts in a request for conditional use permit. What happens is, no matter what the subject of it is, it ends up being granted. If you look at their annual report, they say, well, this year we got 23 requests for conditional use permits and we granted 23. The year before that, it was 27 and 27. And you can go back into perpetuity with that. So I think basically I'll ask the good offices of the city administrator to contact our consultant on this and ask him to propose a way where we can review our attitude toward conditional use permits. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I agree. And the state law change of 5 years ago was instructive on this because I think historically a lot of people who aren't part of government think there's prohibited uses, you can't do this. Permitted uses, you can do this, no question. And then this broad body of conditional uses where we allow it if we want to. That's not how it works. There's a presumption and there's evidence required to not grant. So we can go through that. That would be very helpful, I think you're right, to the council and to the Plan Commission. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor, and I'm going to ask the clerk for a roll call vote on this, please. Unless there, without objection, I'll call for a vote.
Can I withdraw a motion if I put it on?
Excuse me?
He's withdrawing the motion. And I'll withdraw my second.
What?
Keep it a second.
You withdrew the motion and second.
They did.
Yeah. Okay.
So we need a motion to approve.
What?
We need to take action yet on that item.
We're supposed to take action on it.
You need some action on that item. You just have it hanging out pulled from.
That's right. Okay, I see Mr. O'Reilly's hand up. Mr. O'Reilly, are you about to bail us out of this?
I'm going to give it a shot.
Good luck.
What I want to do is make a motion to approve the Plan Commission's recommendations.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Giles. Discussion? There being no discussion now, can I have the roll call vote?
Fire,
Yes.
Werman,
Yes.
Tompkins,
Yes.
Varsho,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Stauber,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Spiros.
Yes.
O'Reilly.
Yes.
Rigel.
Yes.
Okay, moving along. Item M, presentation of Visit Marshfield Update 2024 Business Plan introduced by Steve Barg, City Administrator, presented by Matt McLean, Executive Director of Visit Marshfield.
Thank you. As Matt comes to the front, I'd just like to touch on the fact that we've had a very good relationship with Visit Marshfield, formerly the Convention and Visitors Bureau, over the years. We've had agreements with them in the past. The most recent agreement that we signed was back in the summer of 2022. We're operating under that agreement right now. It involves a lot of communication between the parties and efforts to cooperate where we can. And so Matt is here tonight to give an update on what Visit Marshfield has been up to and looking ahead to 2024 and their business plan. So Matt, whenever you're done delivering, it's all yours.
Okay, it looks like this is the mic I'll use here. Thank you. I passed around, we were able to secure the cover of a major tourism guide, Fun in Wisconsin. So there's thousands of copies right now around the state at dozens of visitor centers. And so it's kind of the first time we've been on a major tourism guide other than our own guide. So please get a chance to peek at that. We have a nice article in there as well. So yeah, thank you for having me tonight. And Steve, thank you for the introduction. I want to talk to you a little bit about some updates and some things we're doing, as well as our 2024 business plan. First of all, Visit Marshfield. Our mission statement is to attract visitors to Marshfield through marketing, development of attractions, and events to create economic impact. One update note, I did get some of our hotel occupancy reports for September. That was our last full month of reporting, and we're up 13% year over year. Maple Fall Fest was a big success with sold out hotels and record revenues. And we funneled the revenues from Maple Fall Fest back into a tourism grant program that we give out to partners and organizations that run events that draw visitors. I'd also like to take this time to really thank the Parks and Recreation Department, Wildwood Zoo, Street Department, Police Department, Ordnance, Auxiliary, GIS, and anybody else I'm forgetting, for we couldn't do this event without a lot of support from the city. Another item is we had heard about the electrical issues at the fairgrounds and became aware there was kind of a gap of funding to help make that happen. So my board authorized we're going to do a $20,000 contribution to the fair to help make that ends meet to get that electrical work done, and they're going to give us some sponsorship value in that. So we wanted to help our partners for the dog show that have overnight visitors, the fair overnight visitors, and events and activities that happen that definitely drive some visitor traffic. So at this time, I'll do a brief overview of our business plan. So really, between the strategic marketing for major events, we have Dairy Fest, Hub City Days, Central Wisconsin State Fair, Maple Fall Fest, and Rotary Winter Wonderland are kind of the main events that we see driving visitor traffic to town, as well as our major attractions, Wildwood Zoo, Jurassic Park, the Wenzel Family Plaza, kind of our brand, pushing the Marshfield May New brand, and as well as downtown Marshfield. So really, on these first two pages, we have a $105,000 budgeted really to kind of push those different attractions and events. And that's about a 10% increase from the previous year. Our target audiences and demographics, we do definitely skew female. And we're talking to people that are coming to the Marshfield Medical Center, business travelers, families, are kind of some of our main targets. You can also see the geographic markets, Madison, Chicago, Milwaukee, the Fox cities are, I won't do the whole list, but those are some of our main audiences that we're going after. The next portion there really was just showing the different mediums that we are kind of planning to use to spend that money on the marketing. Really, I'll just kind of go through the rest of this briefly here. Really, with our administration expenses, some professional services, our grant program, contribution towards the Wenzel Family Plaza, our total budget for this year is $445,000. And then to jump to on the objectives and goals, I'll touch on a few of these. Really, we've coordinated with the Economic Development Board and found about 9 items in their strategic plan. I think this was from 2021, 2022, and those were items that we can work together on. And a couple of those I'll just bring out is support efforts to bring in new retail, restaurant, entertainment businesses. So that's definitely something we're trying to work on. Support efforts to enhance downtown to make it more attractive for businesses, consumers, and residents. And then to continue to support the Main Street program in their efforts to retain new businesses. I want to thank Kaylee Gomez for being here tonight in support. I had a little more information. We had some questions about kind of which dollars are kind of going towards, where do we break out the funds and which group is kind of seeing that value. So I did just get a marketing report from my partners here that through the first 3 quarters of the year with our social media marketing and email newsletters, we'd spent $23,600 kind of supporting the downtown effort in Main Street, $9,000 towards the plaza, $11,400 to the zoo. The fair was $4,400, and then we did a marketing campaign with the fair and Hub City Days that was over $10,000, $300. So that's kind of for the first 3 quarters of this year. Let me jump back to my notes real quick. So actually, that's kind of what I wanted to discuss today here. I just open it at this time for any questions or comments from the council.
Mike?
Thank you. I would like to start out with a thank you. You guys do a really good job with promoting the city and the events that happen here. That's great. What happened with the campground at the fair, it's obviously a difficult solution with not a lot of money to cover it. So I just wanted to also say thank you and appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else? You're getting off easy tonight, Matt.
Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Stauber.
How long have you been in this role, Matt?
Just over 10 years. I think it'll be 11 years in February.
Okay, all right. I'm fairly new again, but I get a good vibe, and I think that's key in a role that you have, that you present the city in a good light and make it attractive to people that might want to visit. The one question I have, and I don't know the answer to this, how do you measure bang for your buck in your line of work?
Usually it's going to be like impressions, website click-throughs, and then really checking the hotel occupancies and the room tax money that's created from that. So we're actually, 2022 was a record year, kind of got a bounce back from the COVID years, and we're actually pacing about better than I anticipated for 2023. I was anticipating, I think we were going to be about 10% down, but right now with the returns from the room tax and whatnot, it's only looking like about 5%. I think there's still some of that, what people call revenge travel. Couldn't do it for a few years, so they're coming back and doing it.
All right, well, congratulations again, and congratulations on getting that front page. It's pretty important stuff there.
Thank you, Russ.
Natasha.
I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe Kaylee could. I noticed that downtown Marshfield was awarded a grant from the Seed Committee from the county. Do you know, was that related to Visit Marshfield, to tourist activities?
I probably have to refer that one to Kaylee. Do you want to come up, Kaylee? She's like, I came here to support you. I didn't know I was going to.
There's always that risk, isn't there? We have a seed grant from the county specifically to beautify rear entries for our businesses. So it's something to supplement the facade program, something that would be more specific to that business, thinking lighting, signage, landscaping, things that would welcome people back and encourage them to park in rear parking lots.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Any other questions? If not, Matt, thanks a lot for the. Oh my goodness, he speaks. Go ahead, you're up.
I'm going to say this. In order that we work with
our marketing agency. Thanks, Mike. And Mike is on our board, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other remark? Again, thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee, for wading through it. Next up is, what? Okay, second reading of ordinance number 1947, or 1497, revised, allowing chickens on single-family lots in certain zoning districts. And Steve, you get to go to the top.
I will, thank you. Before I do, I want to thank Matt and Kaylee as well, and Denise and Karen from Mackey. We have some excellent partners to work with in economic development, and we have good relations with them, and we thank them for all they do. But yes, the road has been long on chickens. We started talking about this back in, I think, the early part of summer. We're now up to a second reading of a revised ordinance. And if you recall back in the first reading of the revised ordinance in late October, the purpose of the changes and why you didn't see it for a couple months is staff had uncovered a few things that really needed to be addressed. One of them was this issue about who was going to be actually in control, so to speak. If you recall, the original ordinance was under the auspices of the city clerk's office being treated as a license. But our development services staff said, wait a minute, we now have ordinance working with us, and really it would make sense for it to be a permit operating out of development services rather than a license out of the city clerk's office. So it's been modified that way. Also, a big concern was the fact that if you looked at it, our intent has always been to allow chickens on single-family lots on single-family uses within areas zoned for single-family. What we found by looking back at the original draft is it appeared that you could be having it on a duplex, for example. A duplex could have a chicken coop in a single-family district, and that's really not our intent. We don't want to have the issue where somebody is saying, wait a minute, I live here, and right on my back door is, are chickens, and I'm not getting the separation. It's not my desire to see that. So we wanted to make sure we were talking about single-family uses in single-family related districts. We've cleaned that up. We also dealt with a few other minor little things that we looked at with fences and some code language to make sure that it was all appropriate and proper. So what you have in front of you now has been reviewed by multiple city staff, the city attorney. It's recommended for your consideration tonight. We'd like to have it approved if you find it appropriate. So with that in mind, I would recommend approval of ordinance number 1497.
Rebecca, is there a second? Natasha, any discussion? If not, are you ready to vote? If so, could I have a roll call on this one too, please?
Meyer? Werman? Tompkins? Varsho?
No.
Wagner?
Yes.
Stauber?
Yes.
Giles?
Yes.
Spiros? O'Reilly? Rigel?
Yes.
And what's the count on that vote,
That
please?
would be 8-2. Motion
8-2.
carries.
Okay, thank you. And then moving on, first reading of ordinance number 1504, rezoning parcel 33-0678, or excuse me, 0698 from the CMU Community Mixed Use to MR12 Multifamily Residential, presented by Steve Barr.
Thank you, Council President. Well, hearkening back to the comments made earlier tonight by one of the speakers in public comment and to the rather lengthy discussion of the Plan Commission, which I didn't see live, but I've had a chance to view it on tape. There's been obviously a lot of discussion about this particular request to rezone the property to MR12 multifamily residential. Just a real brief moment before I get into the staff memo, which I'm going to kind of cover rather closely at what Bryce put together. But where are we at in the process? So TIF District 14 was created, it was made official and approved by the council and the Joint Review Board back at the end of September. That created the district that we're talking about that provides incentives for development within that specified area. The next phase of this is the rezoning request to change this property from CMU, community mixed use, to MR12, multifamily residential. The purpose of that from the individual requesting this is to allow duplexes and townhouses, which right now are not permitted under the community mixed use, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. Following this, and again, this is all about zoning at this point, following this, if this were approved, the interested party, the applicant, if you want to call them that, would have to come through and get other approvals as part of the process to do what they're looking to do on this parcel. So it's a multi-family, a multi-step approach, as are many things here in zoning in the community. So what we have tonight is request to go from CMU community mixed use to MR12 multifamily. CMU allows townhouses, but does not allow duplexes by right or by conditional uses. Both duplexes and townhouses would be allowed in the new MR12. MR12 is generally a little bit lower density of residential permitted. And as is noted in the staff memo, that there's potential for a road, Bradford Court, that would connect Adams Avenue to a development that might occur within this zoned area. The future land use 2017-2037 comprehensive plan referred to this as a transitional mixed-use area. And if you think about areas along highways, and effectively that's what Veterans Parkway is up in that neighborhood, it is effectively Highway 13 headed out towards Spencer. You have a mix of uses, and you have transition zones as to what's appropriate along the highway. So typically those will allow things that you might not otherwise see that might have some level of density of residential along with commercial or even possibly some light industrial. In making the proposal to do this, the applicant is suggesting that these low-density multifamily uses would fit in well, that these densities would be appropriate given the uses that are already out there in the surrounding parcels. The property being zoned CMU right now would allow for large-scale and small-scale office, retail, service, and lodging uses compatible with community character, somewhat similar in some ways to the MR12 zoning district, but as I mentioned, there are some differences, and one of them is that the density level of what's permitted as duplexes, for example, and townhouses are more of an MR12 type of use. The subject property is 5.6 acres. I caution you again, in your packet, there is an actual layout of the proposed development. And that's good for illustration purposes. I think it's good that the Plan Commission and the council see that. But remember, when you're talking about rezoning this property to MR12, you're talking about allowing anything that's listed under MR12. So the fact that somebody today might be presenting a plan that has duplexes and triplexes, that may not come to pass. And if it doesn't, many other types of things would be allowed. So you have to look at the list and don't hone in on this as being tied to this particular intent of this applicant. You're looking at approving anything that would be fitting in the zoning code under the MR12 designation. With that in mind, there was a public hearing held. There were a lot of issues raised along the way. There were comments about traffic volume, noise concerns, the installation of Bradford Court, who would pay for that installation if that takes place. Residents from Marwood have voiced the concern, as was mentioned earlier tonight, that new residents might complain about the noise in their day-to-day operations, indicating as they have that they have been there first and wondering if that is appropriate to have to face those types of complaints that could theoretically come. At the end of the day, though, the Plan Commission recommended to approve the rezoning request and directed staff to put together the ordinance you have in front of you for consideration. Tonight it's before you for first reading. No action required. Take any questions, concerns, discussion you have, but it would come back for second reading on November 28th. And that's what I have for a staff report.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the comments earlier about the approval process, whether it was legal, the way that transpired.
I'm going to have to say that at least that part of it that I was involved and aware of, that I didn't notice anything that was illegal. I didn't see the language specifically about where this came from, which is what was suggested. In other words, that it was initiated by a non-owner. However, it was essentially staff that brought it forward. And when I say staff, I'm talking about consultant Bryce. To my knowledge, that's where it was done. I am relying on that he did that properly. So I didn't specifically look at that. But other than that, in terms of the hearing process and the approval that took place at the Plan Commission, I was present for that, not specifically intending for that purpose, but I did sit through it. There wasn't anything that was concerning in regard to that process.
Anything else? Natasha?
I do believe I read in the Plan Commission minutes that they suggested a sound barrier. Is that something that, that suggestion, if that's something that works, seems fair, but I don't know if cost sharing would happen. But
so, and there's a couple of you that were there at the Plan Commission, and those that so Mike, I think you were there. So I'm gonna leave that to you. So if I say something that's inconsistent with your recollection, let's have a discussion about that. But what was discussed was that for the purpose of the zoning, that's not a requirement or something. It's not like a conditional use permit where we can impose a condition for it. In other words, we're gonna approve the zoning conditioned on you getting this sound barrier. What was discussed was that in the future, even though the zoning may change, somebody has to essentially go through an application process to do the construction, get a building permit, have approvals through the normal process. And what the Plan Commission, and they even discussed preparing, some kind of document or recommendation. It was included in this, the minutes for that meeting is what I recall, but specifically that it be considered for future purposes that when you do look at permits, et cetera, that a consideration for requiring some type of a sound barrier or whatever would be done. So it wouldn't happen here in terms of the approval by the council for the zoning, but it would take place through implementation of staff and maybe consideration of any development agreements or anything else. That's where you folks would then be able to impose that type of requirement for purposes of moving forward. But the Plan Commission recognized they didn't have the authority. That was discussed with Bryce. It was discussed with me at that time that you really don't have the ability to impose a condition on the consideration of a zoning change.
But we could on a CUP.
CUP or for purposes of this, it might be a development agreement. If somebody's going to do something with an apartment complex or do something there, then you could, as part of that agreement to approve that, require a sound barrier.
I did attend that meeting, and I'm going to use the Chapter 43 of Robert's Rules. And to be in a small group like this, the chair can speak and vote, by the way, so it's not illegal. So anyway, I was at that meeting and I saw the discussion going on, and it's my understanding that where Merriwood is, they've been there for many years, and that they're back, I think, under when the city redid the zoning ordinance, I can't remember the year of that. It was like 2011 or something like that. Basically, they changed it to such a point where what they're doing there now could be a prohibited use. However, they were sort of, because they were there and doing it first, they were, I hate to use the term grandfathered, but they were grandfathered in. And so they're basically allowed to do what they're doing. And if I remember correctly, what the concern was, it wasn't about what is, it's about what may. And that is, if residential goes in next to that and they complain about it, that would essentially make their business, that complaint would make their business go away. That's what I understood. That's what I understood it to be. I think there's a solution there. I think this is one of those rare no-fault things. And I think that between the three parties, a developer, the city, and Merriwood, they should all participate equally in a result or in a project to create that. And there was, she was right, there was a mention of a sound barrier. So I think there's something that lies there, and I think we have 2 weeks to make this before this is read a second time. And I'm sure we can work out some kind of an arrangement with Bryce, or may get some advice from him anyway.
So, I mean, if I can
Please.
recognize.
I'm
So
begging you to
I
do
did sit through the meeting, and so here's the issue. Some of what you were saying is obviously this business had been there for a very long time. They had what amounts to a legitimate concern. I acknowledge that. But what we were talking about was that primarily the issue is one of a regulation through a different part of the code, not the zoning code. And that's noise code. So that's different than zoning, and so you don't get grandfathered in on that. We talked a little bit about that we had, similar concerns here in other areas of the city with respect to church bells. We had a similar kind of thing where, technically speaking, it's a noise violation, so it's not the same as zoning. And so grandfathering in doesn't really apply. In terms of what's in front of you here tonight, and in terms of a second reading that may come about, this is sort of an isolation. I don't know how you could have the parties get together and talk and come up with some idea to make them feel better, but I don't know of a way to incorporate that into a zoning change. If there was something that you want to look at in terms of that, that would have to be sort of either a side discussion or what have you. My view of trying to address the concern of the party that's been in place there is, again, it's a legitimate concern. The code in regard to noise is one that is applicable to everybody, okay? So that's not unique to them. And if the concern is that now you're going to put something residential in there, it doesn't mean that they haven't for the last 20 years even been violating the noise code. It just means that nobody was in a place or a position near to them to actually complain about it. That's a possibility.
Right, and this is be the case that they're concerned about, is that this would be putting somebody who would complain about it within their reach.
Correct.
Now, if you take a look at the plot itself, that you'll see that right at the top of it on West McMillan, that's a CBRF, or a nursing home. And this is directly abutting their property too. And nobody's complained about it from there, have they? I mean, do we have a record of that?
Well, I sure wasn't involved in any part of it. So
okay. That's why I'm saying I think this is something that could be resolved, and we have 2 weeks to do it and to see if this is to explore that, okay? Mr. Stauber, and then Ms. Let's see, that'd be Spiros.
So the comment regarding spot zoning, that kind of caught my ear, because thinking back a few zoning administrators a year ago, the guy's name was Will.
Yep.
Did a fine job cleaning up our zoning in Marshfield, because we did have spot zoning. And I would like to hear a response to the comment that this is spot zoning, because I'm personally not seeing it. But any thoughts on that?
I'll start, and I hope the city attorney will chime in as well. It's a term a lot of people use. I'm not trying to discount it. It's a real term. In this case, what you're looking at when you look at whether or not you want to rezone this property, you're looking at the property to the west, which is CMU along the highway, community mixed use, allows for some levels of commercial and those types of office retail activities. That's where you see Fleet Farm in addition to the Merriwood building. And then if you look to the north and east, you see lower levels of residential, SR4 and TR6. So, while you might say, well, this is picking a spot and zoning it just for this one purpose out of character, you really could look at the MR12, which is higher, slightly a step up, and say, by allowing townhouses and whatnot, you're creating a more normal, this is from a planning standpoint, not a legal standpoint, you're creating a fairly natural transition zone from highway, light, commercial, whatever, to, townhouses to single family. That's what you not oftentimes see in plan zoning. And I'm not discounting what the speaker said earlier, but that's not out of character for zoning.
And to put it very straight, the way I would say this is from a legal perspective, not spot zoning. That's something where you're specifically picking out a spot and it's changed and it's distinct, no transitions in between. That's not the case.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. O'Reilly, Rebecca was up next. I'm sorry.
The only thing I was going to say is, in listening to the speaker earlier, I certainly can understand his concerns because, he has been a long established business and he basically doesn't want people to start complaining on him for the noise they make. I get it. But I think the only time to address the noise or the possibility of noise is in a development agreement once we figure out if or what will end up there. I think that's how you have to do it. You have to do it in a development agreement. I mean, we do this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, we require businesses to, put up foliage in their parking lots as a barrier. And I mean, this isn't anything new. This is just something, it's regarding noise rather than, whatever, unsightliness from the road. So I think that's the only time that really we can address that particular concern.
Awesome. Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I would just, like to remind everyone that residential can go in there the way it is now. If I'm not mistaken, it's only the type of a residential that's going to change. So the zoning change is not going to really impact the issue that we're talking about now. So in my opinion, the zoning change is not going to influence the issue at hand that's being discussed so much one way or the other. It's just a different type of housing that's allowed in that area. So I would agree that through a development agreement, it would be the time that we deal with it because we don't even know at this point what would go in there or how it would be laid out or anything. So I guess from my perspective, although I acknowledge the issue, I don't know that the zoning change really impacts that.
If I recall from the meeting, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said at the meeting you would write that you felt the zoning should go through, but then you need to argue about the use of the houses this is the first time I've heard you say that it's residential before it can be residential again. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to get at Plan Commission was the same thing, that we deal with this once we have a development agreement or a concrete idea of what wants to go in there.
That makes me think is there some specific use that you're saying that shouldn't go in there?
No, not at all. Saying? No, I'm just saying that.
It sounds like it. I'm sorry.
No, what I'm getting at is right now the way it's zoned, residential can go in there. Okay. And if we change it, residential will go in there. So that aspect of it allows a different type of housing, but it doesn't have anything to do with this sound issue. That would have to be handled after we have a development design and we could kind of deal with that issue.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Oh yeah, Mr. Varsho.
So to be completely frank, this basically it comes down to a human issue. Know the surroundings where you're moving into. If you're moving into a place and a business is behind you, you shouldn't call and complain about the noise. You moved there. You knew they were there. They're sitting right there. They're doing their work every day. People complain about things too much. And I really think that
but that's why we have lawyers.
It just makes no sense to sit here and discuss this constantly, when Ms. O'Reilly said, it's zoned residential. We're changing it to residential. We put it in there. If someone moves in and the next day they call and complain because Merriwood's doing their job during the day, you tell them, I'm sorry, you moved there. That's what you did. They're there. They were there for a long time. Move somewhere else.
Stop complaining.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Anybody else? Okay, this is the first reading. Second reading will be in 2 weeks. And next on here is, let's see, change of the second meeting date in December to December 19th.
Thank you. Yeah, every year we look at changing the second meeting date in December because councils are not committed enough to want to meet around Christmas Day. I get it. No, just kidding. Yeah, the fourth Tuesday would always be Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, somewhere around there that none of us wants to have public meetings, and I totally get it. So we usually move it up 1 week, which means we have back-to-back meetings, usually on the second Tuesday and the third Tuesday. And usually the third Tuesday at staff level, we work with the council to make sure that we keep the agenda as light as possible. We're not trying to tack on more things that we need to. Oftentimes, that's when we have license approvals and things like that that need to get handled before the end of the new year. So with that in mind, the recommendation is that you move your second meeting in December to Tuesday, December 19th, and the lineup would be JL at 5 o'clock, Finance, Budget, and Personnel at 5:30, and then that'd be followed by the council meeting at 6, and the Plan Commission to follow that at 7. Possibly those meetings might get backed up a little bit based upon the length of each one, but that would be the intent of that night. So the recommendation is that you move your second meeting in December to Tuesday, December 19th.
I make a motion to approve the dates and times.
Motion by Varsho, second by O'Reilly. Discussion. There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The date has been changed. Your magicians. Okay, next up is adjourned to closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.
Sorry, suggested items for future agendas, please.
What?
Item Q.
Oh, I missed one. Geez. Okay. Oh, yeah. Suggested items for future agendas. Natasha.
All right. I think this would be the Judiciary and License Committee. I think I would ask them to review this for public notice of public hearing. And just to make sure that we are doing it a little better, I think it should be put out on our text alerts. I think it should be on our city website. And then if it's in the district of an alderperson, I think the alderperson should be specifically told so that they can go and hear what's being said by the people in their district. So I think that maybe is appropriate for that committee to look at. I'm not quite sure.
Or the communications
Actually,
committee?
we were granted the power to look at only, what do they call it? Charter issues. But they, generally speaking, we weren't given permission to handle policy decisions themselves. Because that would be a policy decision, right?
Yeah. I tend to agree with Councilmember Varsho, what he said a minute ago. I mean, I think if we're not meeting the legal requirements, that's one thing, but we are. What you're suggesting is we go beyond that, and maybe that's more of a communications issue.
So maybe that could go to the communications issue. And can you guys talk about not using Marshfield Herald, maybe using Hub City, because that's free? And I have Marshfield Herald digitally, and I could not find it. So anyhow, I think we could do this better.
Okay. Okay, now are we going to go to closed session?
Well, I just want to also say, can we say item for future agenda, the big topic we talked about, I don't know how we can structure it, but to really relook at our conditional use.
Conditional use permits.
Yeah, so I don't know how or where that would be a good place to do it.
That may start a plan, I would think. Plan Commission.
Yeah.
Review the current process, look at any deficiencies or potential for changes.
Sure.
Yep, will do.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business, whether competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Specifically, update on possible development project in TIF District Number 5. Motion to go in, motion by O'Reilly, second by Spiros to go in there into closed session.
Fire.
Yeah.
Werman. Tompkins. Varsho.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Yes.
Stauber. Giles.
Yes.
Spiros. O'Reilly. Rigel.
Yes.
Okay, we are in closed session.